What magnificent opportunities we have had. And I want to tell, is it James, our peace walker? James, I am a mother. I am a grandmother from the Mormon tradition. There was a prophecy that spoke that you know not of someone walking from the west to the east, gathering individuals as they walked, independent of religion, to take back the government. That was a prophecy within not the leadership of the church, within people of the church. So there is so many stories that have been shared today that as a white woman from a Celtic, German, French, Scandinavian background without tribe heritage, that I could expand on because of connections into the divine that I was led to. So when I saw that Susan was gathering these Indigenous elders, I knew I had to be here, and I said yes. And you will understand, because many times you said yes, and then you go like, what in the heck am I doing? What am I doing? I am not of a tribal Indigenous background, but I knew this was the place to be. I was given the information to share, and I could read it. I may need to, because I want to make sure I gift to you what I, as a white woman, was told to bring to the white sisters, so the white sisters could share it with our sisters. When I listened to the Mamos yesterday, and they knew that they had a message for their white brothers. Did you notice? Their white brothers. The condor, heart, light. And what have so many of our men been cut off from? Their heart. And I knew why I was here. So I'm going to share. I do very rarely present with papers, but I wanted to make sure I covered what I was told to bring. When I was 17, I thought I had life handled. I knew how to keep a house clean, keep house plants watered, leaves cleared. I had taken care of my home while my mother, a single mother, raised the children and worked. I had aced high school, and now I was ready for what God had told me, the men in my world had told me was my job. I was going to find a man from a mission, and I was going to get married and have children, and I was going to keep the home. I knew how to do that. And all I needed to do was to be able to listen to the men in my world and obey. Did good. I had it handled. About 15 years later, had a few disruptions in life. I loved my children. No. My husband was killed, and I became a single mom. Fortunately, by then, I had made that divine. My first step in was Christ, and I attribute my life to that connection. And my life was doing pretty darn well. Still within the context of my patriarchal religion, you see. Until one day in my community, there was an announcement of an Indigenous filmmaker that was going to be at a church, not mine, talking about his adventures traveling the world to all the Indigenous tribes he could connect with to capture their prophecies and their stories, to be able to see how they were similar. And I went, man, is that interesting. I wasn't in pain. Wasn't searching for answers. I was really quite confident. I was confident enough to be curious. And so I went. I walked in the door. I sat in the pews. People came in and filled the pews, and I didn't know any of them, really. And then he got up and spoke. Tall man, beautiful man, Indigenous filmmaker. And he told the stories. He told of the condor and the eagle. He told of the landing on the moon, eagle landing, right? He told of the 4 tribes' colors and how they're responsible for the elements connected to the directions. All of this was new to me, and I loved it. And then he shifted. He was down in South America, speaking to tribes, and people knew he was looking for stories. And they came up to him and said, you need to go into the jungles of Borneo. He said, why? They said, in the jungles, it has, and you know these stories, families fight against each other, tribes fight against each other. And one day, many years ago, maybe 20, one of the villages in Borneo, one of the tribes, attacked another village they felt had wronged them. And they were so enraged that they destroyed first all of their structures, kidnapped a few of the children, killed the rest of the people in the village, and tossed their bodies in the caves nearby. Eventually, and they put these children in various tribes so they'd be kind of assimilated. They wouldn't have their normal traditions. So he said, what happened? The storyteller said, well, it seems that 4 young men ended up going to college, and in their conversations out and about, discovered they were all 4 from that same village. Been raised separately, had different backgrounds, but they knew they were from that village. And they did what our young people do. They came up with an idea, a radical idea. They didn't sit stewing in the pain. They didn't sit blaming everybody else. They didn't sit in anger. They said, what can we do? And they made a decision. They made a decision, these 4 young men, that they would pack whatever they needed, and they would go into the jungle to the area where their village once was, and they would live in the caves with the bones of their ancestors to dream awake the bones of their ancestors. And they said, you must go meet these 4 young men. And he did. And they were bringing back the ability to walk, whether they were just like showing him some of the things that had been restored from the bones, from their ancestors, not traditionally handed down. These ancestors were. I was touched. And I did something I don't normally do. Usually after a lecture, I'm very appreciative. We might do a clapping, whatever we do, and then I just quietly go out the door. This time I didn't. So I'm sitting in the pews, and I see others getting in line, and I find myself rising from my pews city place, and I get in line to go speak to the presenter. Comes up my turn, and I tell him how much I appreciated it, because I did. I told him how touched I was by the story, and I was. And then this tall, and I do not remember his name, I wish I did, but I don't. This tall, indigenous, handsome, young, not young, he was probably in his 50s, and I was like 30, so he was older. He looked me in the eye, and he locked in my eye. And he said, when are you going to dream awake the bones of your ancestors? And I was puzzled. I do genealogy. That's our ancestors. And he said, the women ancestry. Now they tell me I have 5 minutes, and so I'm going to tell you very quickly. It has been 30 years. I went about doing my work, raising my family, stretching myself greatly. And then I realized, because I had forgotten, it wasn't the driving factor. This was the driving factor, the master plan. But I ran into that same pain you have seen in your world, in your family, in your life. You're going right and then you hit a wall. You've got a dream and you get squashed. Cycles of pain, I called it. And so I went to that spiritual teacher and I said, how do we stop the cycles of pain? We are being crushed by mountains of domination. And I said, I want to go to learn. How do I find the cause and remove the cause? And they said, it isn't being done that way on the planet. If that's what you want, we will have to teach you. I said, I'm up for it. So I call myself a mystic because I was taught totally by star beings from the galactic worlds way before we had Earth. And they told me this about me. We had become so entrapped in those galactic worlds. As souls in star group families, we were already trapped by those whose agendas are to dominate. They existed. So as we made this plan for Earth, way back before, women's bodysuit itself was made to be the leader, to be sensitive at the solar plexus, to sense any danger, domination, evil coming toward our families, our village, with the authority voice I call Sophia, the wisdom to soar into the heavens, staff into the ground, and say, not in my world, and those energies be removed. Men's bodysuits were given that heart center, the love, blowing it through heart center into the world so we could weave with it. Us women, we weave, we create, we root. And we have a new mycelium, by the way, called the wisdom, the wise women's mycelium, totally new, in the earth. As soon as those dominators understood our plan, they rewired the bodysuits, crippled the men's heart, took away the woman's solar plexus of authority. We could still feel too emotional now, they say, because nobody listens to the canaries in the mines. We should be heard because we have the voice that says something's wrong here. Heavens, bring them in and remove. It's not about the person. What is the energy that is impacting a person, a group, an organization that is contained, that has been tainted because of domination energy? So I'm here for the women. because it's through the women that we have been able to wake up the authority, to bring in that power, Sophia, that says, staff in the ground, this is my space, my country, my world, my family, soared into the heavens, clear it out, and get the shackles off of our men. The men's bodysuits have been used, and we call them invaders, we call them dominators, we call them patriarchal controllers. It is simply outsider dominators using men bodysuits, and it's the women's voices that can make a difference. Probably 5 minutes are up. I want to honor that. Thank you so much.